Wonderful afternoon event. I'd like to welcome you all to the Passage and thank you for spending your Sunday afternoon with us, supporting the local independent bookstore. It means everything to us, obviously, and it's also how we can bring incredible authors like today's with us, so thank you. Today Book Passage is proud to welcome Patrice Vecchione, acclaimed author, editor, poet, and teacher. Patrice is passionate about nature and art, and that passion shines in her latest book, Step into Nature. This is an eye-opening exploration of how to deepen our relationship with nature as a way, really, of nurturing our own creative lives as well. Patrice uses her vast experience teaching creative writing and collage, as well as her Parks Department-based outdoor workshops, as a basis for the exercises and suggestions she tucks into each chapter of this profound and beautiful book. So please join me in a warm, warm welcome for Patrice Vecchione.
Thank you, that was a beautiful introduction. Great to see you all here. Hey, I know you. I know, it's really nice to see everybody here on a beautiful day. Because if you weren't here, you might be stepping out into nature. We've locked the door so you can't leave until after I'm finished, okay? I would like, in addition to thanking you all for being here, to thank one person in particular. When Beyond Words, Simon & Schuster purchased this book, they gave me 6 months to write it. And I thought, how am I going to write a book in 6 months? I really didn't know. The last nonfiction book I wrote, Writing in the Spiritual Life, I took a year to write. And so I did write the book. Actually, I finished it in about 4.5 months. I finished a draft of the book. And I used the last 6 weeks to do the edits, though that might not have been so obvious to the person I'm going to mention in just a moment. I spent those months writing 7 days a week, 3 to 10 hours a day, and took 4 days off during that period of time. And those 6 months are the happiest 6 months of my life. So it's nice to know that at 57 one can say that's your happiest so far time rather than 27, right? And then because Beyond Words is such an incredible house to work with, I was given the privilege to have a developmental editor who really, really knew what she was doing. When I wrote the book, I didn't look at my contract to see how many words they wanted it to be. And so when I finished the draft of the book, I looked at the contract and said, oh, this is very interesting. I have 120,000 words, and they wanted 70,000 words. So I spent 6 weeks getting 120 down to 90.
Wow.
But still 90 is considerably like 20,000 to be precise, more words. But this woman sitting back there who I'm going to embarrass, and I don't care, Sylvia Spratt, she is the one who transformed this book with me, and I am so grateful to you. Yeah. My book is in 15 chapters. It starts off with a chapter called The Allure of the Earth. And then the next chapter's a journey. Then I talk about what to carry. So I put this book in the order of my experience of discovering the relationship between nature and imagination. I was a distance bicyclist, and when I turned 50, I rode 100 miles. I got on my bike and rode 100 miles, came home at the end of the day, and my beloved husband took me out for dinner. And that was the last time I've ever been on my bike. I have arthritis in my neck, and I can't ride a racing bike. And to me, why ride a bike if you can't ride a racing bike? And if you can't go 35 miles an hour, what's the point of being on a bicycle? So I had to give up the bike, and I was so sad. But what I found in its place was a park in Monterey called Jack's Peak Park. And it's about now it's gotten bigger over the years. It's now about 900 acres of predominantly Monterey pine and some oak forest. And I began writing, and I noticed, well, I'll read to you a little bit about what happened. So I talk about, in the book, the chapters are about wandering and the experience of wonder. And then getting lost. Getting lost is a big part of walking in the woods, for me anyway. And fear is another part that I'll just talk a little bit about that. And then I bring in sort of try to bring in the artistic side and really make the link between nature and imagination. And I look at the 5 senses and the elements and how nature does what she does, the forms that nature takes, how we might be inspired by those forms. And because I am greatly informed by animals, there's a chapter on animals, and then the second to the last chapter is about solitude. Walking in nature alone is, nothing personal, darling, is my favorite thing to do. And because that's the way that it links up for me with creativity, with imagination. So I'm going to read several excerpts from the book and talk intermittently and take questions should you have them. And if you haven't questions but you have answers, I would greatly appreciate them instead. My infatuation with the woods began with the most basic act. I bent to tie my shoes and placed one sneaker-clad foot in front of the other. I walked into the forest along narrow poison oak bordered paths and on former logging roads, up hills, around bends, past trees and more trees, into sunlight, and more often into shadow and dappled darkness. I didn't set out to revive my imagination, didn't think my spirit would be restored, and had no idea that joy and inspiration would overcome me. I went into the woods near my Monterey home for exercise, enjoyed the air filling my lungs when I walked up hills, felt my head clear, became enchanted by the views. Over time, I became newly and deeply curious about the earth. Nature began working on me, and I began to change and grow. My perspective on the world and my own life shifted. I found possibility where there'd been none. I wanted to learn about that which had never held my attention before, from butterfly habitats to mountain lion hunting tactics. From that, art came. It was a natural progression, inspired by the conversations I was having with the earth. Making art felt less effortful, the call to it more true. Though art has been a primary part of my life for as long as I can remember, time and nature gave it a greater platform. The creativity of the natural world validates my own endeavors. The earth's bounty and beauty infuse my work. Returning home from a walk, pictures form in my mind that I rush to put on paper. The earth's way of doing things make me want to try them out too. How might a poem make the staccato of raindrops? Could I layer hues in a collage like leaf mulch layered on the ground? Nature's turned my writing upside down. Noticing connections between things makes leaps of imagination nearly effortless. Attention to detail and nuance have grown in me, both in the art I make and in my whole life. Being in nature has deepened my belief in the unexplainable. Magical, spellbound thinking, which is so much a part of artistic process, may serve us more than we believe. One day, I saw a cluster of bees gathering along the trail, making a soft, collective buzz. I spotted their hole-in-the-ground hive, but kept walking. Then, curiosity nabbed me, and I turned around to get a better look. Both hive and bees had disappeared. I doubled back many times, but never saw a single bee. Had they slipped into their hive, buttoned it up, and flown off in it to a safe place? The experience ruffled my thinking with wonder. We have become a people who place utmost faith in the rational mind at the cost of the creative mind. We won't find all the answers we need via a linear and pragmatic route. Certainly not the most beautiful, unpredictable solutions. For the imagination to blossom, we need to think afresh, to learn how to best care for the earth and how to find the will to do so. We need to ask previously unasked questions, be more wholly aware, engage our senses and our spirits, honor our emotions, and put stock in the earth's wisdom. Noticing that the simple act of walking allows my thoughts to shift and that I think differently when my feet are in action, I consider my great-grandfather, Alphonse. When he was 12, he fled the orphanage in Rome's Jewish ghetto and stowed away on a ship bound for America. He was heading to New York City and the fellow Italians there, but the ship deposited him in, we think, Charleston, North Carolina. From there, he walked to New York City by himself, age 12, where he worked hard, married my great-grandmother, and years later became a champion pinochle player. He told his grandson, my father, "I had a long walk. Lucky for me it was autumn and the apples were ripe." What I didn't put in the book is he said also, "It was a little hard on my digestion at first, but after a while I got used to it." Walking itself is part of our shared lineage. Once upon a time, that's how everyone got around. If we return to ambling amongst the trees, might our spirits get wind of it and feel free? Might the art we make find its wings? Alphonse walked his way into a new world, and we might also. I'm going to move into the first chapter and read you a short piece from that. This is a chapter called The Allure of Nature, Waking Up to Nature. Shortly after college, my sister signed up for a several-month-long backpacking expedition. The leader took the group into California's High Sierra for study and exploration, where they would be incommunicado for weeks at a time. I thought she was crazy. That was the furthest thing from this city girl's idea of fun. Why don hiking boots if I could slip into a pair of heels? How could walking in the mountains lead to anything? Poetry, art, anything except for blistered feet and a profound longing for the comforts of home. My sister has always had an affinity for nature and the animal kingdom in particular. She knew the call of the earth when I was entirely taken by Manhattan's art museums and used bookstores. So didn't I live just as finely before discovering the great outdoors? No, actually, I didn't. Not as finely as I live now, connected to, communing with, and infatuated by the earth. My younger sister knew something important a long time before I caught on. She lives with 5 dogs and at least twice as many cats. And when the mother squirrels and have babies, and the mother squirrels get hit by cars, she takes in the baby squirrels and raccoons and rehabilitates them. And I'm sorry, but that's going just a little too damn far. So now I'm going to read you from the chapter on place, about the connection, how place is important to us and how relationships with particular places are so important. And I really didn't quite know that until I fell in love with Jack's Peak Park. But this is not about Jack's Peak Park. This is called The Map is Not the Place. Returning to New York City after 10 years away, I wanted to take Michael to Astoria, Queens, to see the house that belonged to my grandparents for over 50 years. This is where my father grew up. I thought I'd forgotten the address and got on the phone with my dad, embarrassed to have to ask him. But just as I was about to, the address popped out of my mouth. 2166 19th Street, right, Pop? You got it, he said. From the same forgotten place came AS4 7784. Perhaps some of you are old enough also to remember when telephone numbers, and the AS, of course, there was for Astoria, for Astoria, Queens. So on a brisk March morning, going down the worn subway steps, I oriented us and pointed this way. We walked from Steinway to Ditmars Boulevard and turned left, strolled past the small shopping area, came to La Gouli's pastry shop, where as a child we'd stop on Sundays to get dessert, my favorite, the multi-layered sfouillevelle, and in the summertime, tiny white cups of lemon ice. Next, we passed the Catholic church where my aunt and uncle were married and where the funeral masses for both my grandparents were held. After many years, so little had changed. Tears slammed against my eyes. Several blocks down Ditmars, the street became residential. We turned right at 19th Street, went down a couple of blocks, and there was my grandparents' two-story house on the corner, just as I remembered it. The map had stayed securely in my mind. I carried it all these years. During the Jazz at Lincoln Center concert in Santa Cruz, before playing Beautiful Ugly, Thelonious Monk's only waltz, Wynton Marsalis told the packed house that he owned the original score and had tried to locate Monk's genius in its pages. After years of studying the score, Marsalis told the audience, I realized it wasn't there. Though the map isn't the place, not in the actual world, not in jazz, what Marsalis's band did with that score was genius indeed. In The Wild Places, Robert Macfarlane wrote, before it was a field science, cartography was an art. We are now used to regarding cartography as an endeavor of exacting precision, whose ambition is the elimination of subjectivity from the representation of a given place. Now, I'm not hoping for a creative guide when driving a rental car through downtown Milan, which was a total disaster, as only one other person in this room can testify to. The map was in shreds on the bottom of the floor of the seat of the car before we ever found the train station. But on other occasions, I much prefer the subjective map. We all carry such maps of our past and our present, and in the intimate and personal sense, they're far more reliable than anything we might find printed in color on paper or on our mobile devices. The stories of what happened are the maps we carry inside. So don't you too? Can't you think of the maps that you carry? Could you not right now, sitting here, in your mind, start at a given place and walk back to the home, your childhood home, or one of them, for those of you who have multiple? That map is there. Total, isn't it totally? Can't you just go right there and you see the street and you bring your five senses in? Do you smell the smells? Can you smell how the smell was when you walked into the house and somebody perhaps was making supper? Right? Hear the sounds of the street? Oh, I think an air conditioner just went off talking about sounds. That's very much better. I'd like to read you two more excerpts, and this is toward the end of the book. This is from the chapter about animals. And before I read this excerpt, I want to tell you a short animal story that happened in the park. And if it makes you think I'm a Lulu, well, that's just quite all right. You won't be the first. So one day I was walking in the park on a foggy morning, and I'm a volunteer at the park, so I have the combination to the lock. So I can go into the park anytime I want, and I like to go in rather early, after I think maybe the mountain lions have gone to sleep, but rather early. And an owl swooped down in front of me and continued flying along the trail, very, very, very close in front of me. And I got the shivers, you know. I thought, oh, this is a sign of something. This is telling me something. So owls are seen in various cultures in different ways. They're harbingers of doom, or they're animals of wisdom. They could be a warning sign of something. I took the presence of the owl as a warning of something, but I didn't know exactly what. I thought I better pay careful attention. And a couple of days or a week, I don't quite quite remember, later, I was driving in the park and I heard the sound that once you walk in Jack's Peak, you recognize. The Monterey pines are very shallowly rooted. And so they grow best, which is, this is an incredible metaphor, they grow best close to each other. I'm definitely not a Monterey pine. I don't think I would grow best that close to anyone. But anyway, it's a lovely metaphor. And they grow best close to one another, and their roots intermingle. And that's what keeps them from falling because of their shallow root system and the quality of the soil at the park. They often fall, even when the weather is lovely. And one of my jobs as a volunteer there is to look for the fallen trees that are across the path and photograph and report them to the parks. So this day I'm driving along and I hear the sound, the sad sound of a tree getting ready to give up its place on the earth. And I thought, well, it must be at a distance, but it was rather loud. And what one word that Sylvia made me take out of the book, rightly so. I heard a voice in my head say, "Drive faster, you idiot." She had me get rid of "you idiot," and it was a good choice, but since I'm telling you the story rather than, do you remember that?
I do.
Get rid of "you idiot." But that is what the voice said, drive faster, you idiot. And so I put on the gas pedal, and right behind my car, the tree fell across the road. Now, whether it would have taken me out or whether it would have just wrecked my car, I don't know which it would have done. But in any case, I was glad. And I had to spend, it was such a sad thing, I had to spend several hours in the park before they could get there to cut the tree out of the road. And the rangers did come and move the tree. The reason I was alert is because of that owl. I'm completely convinced that it was warning me. So it was a messenger. When I was working on the edits of this, when I was working on the writing of this book, my really fine editor at Beyond Words, Anna Nowak, said, "I suggest you put a picture of somebody who you're writing to, your audience, your imagined audience. Put a photograph up." And the photograph I put up is of this woman right here, my friend Rachel McKay. And so every time I would think, is this sounding okay? I'd look at Rachel's face and she'd either nod or shake her head. It was very helpful.
I forgot about that.
Did you forget about that?
I did.
So Sharon, this is the piece I was telling you about. This is Michael's cousin Sharon is a veterinarian, and this piece is for you. It's called Thursday, July 15, Encounter with a Dusky-Footed Wood Rat. Toward the end of my walk, up the hills of Roos Ridge Trail, past the spot where the yellow ladybugs are flying, there's always a breeze, even on the stillest of days. I suddenly yelped, startling myself, not conscious of why. I had come a few inches from stepping on a rat. This rat was sweet to look at. About 6 inches long, her snout was rounded. She had a mouse-like demeanor. I was confused. What's a rat doing on the path in the middle of the day? Why didn't she run after hearing my yelp and watching my foot come too close? Backing away, giving us both space, I stopped, looked carefully. The fat little creature was shivering in the hot sun, swaying slightly from side to side. Her eyes were barely open. I thought I saw a cut on the side of her body, looked closer. Yes, a wound upon which flies were gathering. One fly touched the rat's nose, but she didn't flick it away. I got down on my haunches a couple of feet away. Sunlight caught a glint in the rat's now fully open eyes. We looked at each other slowly. I saw no inclination on the rat's part to flee, and was surprised to feel none myself, despite that I don't like rats. I began talking to the little creature, trying to make of my voice a lullaby. "I'm sad that you're hurt," I said in a whisper. I was aware that if someone had walked by at that moment, they would have thought I'd lost it, but I really didn't care. "I'm so sorry," I said to her, at which point, surprising myself again, I began to cry. Here's what I took home with me. The image of light in the rat's eyes, her look of sorrow, the slight sway of her body, and the knowledge that one being suffering is the same as any being suffering. That brief interaction has infused my life from then on, making my empathy bigger. I will tell you that when we had a rat in our kitchen, I did not behave in the same way. And it does not work to try to throw a blanket on a rat. Something else did work. Unfortunately, that rat is no longer alive either. Everything in its place and a place for everything. So I'd like to read you one more section and then take questions and talk a little bit about the writing of this book. This is called To Walk Alone, and this is my favorite part of my book. The happiness of walking alone in the woods is unlike any other happiness. It's communal, but not a town hall. It's celebratory, but there's no clinking of glasses. It's incantatory without priests. Much in the way the happiness of art making or falling in love enthralls, so can this. But I don't feel the swell of joy every time that I walk alone. It's not predictable. This solitary happiness surprises with its suddenness. Yesterday, I went past the park's boundary. There is something mysterious about this that affects me, to go beyond where one is authorized to go, to ignore the no trespassing sign that hangs from a forbidding line of barbed wire. When I get to the other side, there's an ephemeral magic afoot that I think has to do with the fact that people rarely walk in that place. Joy extends far beyond the boundaries of myself. Go past the bench by the trees on the hill that used to afford one an ocean view. Now, due to the growth of the trees, you have to stand on the bench to get that view. Let your vision soften while looking to the left, and you'll see the mere hint of a trail extending past the rusty wire. Lie down on the ground and carefully shimmy underneath the wire. Walk very carefully. Walk through the dense undergrowth and the closely clustered trees to where the trail opens up. This is the place where, looking from a distance, I once saw a cub and a mama bear. I like walking where I know the bears have also walked. This is a ridge top. Old dirt roads go off through the trees in a few directions, but here is where I go straight ahead toward the point, and here is where that happiness gets bigger. It becomes like an unexpected conversation that bounces from the trees to me and every other growing thing in these woods. There is happiness in the crunch of dry leaves beneath my feet. Joy gets caught on the ground along the line between shadow and sunlight, and it rises, reaching up to the treetops. Happiness is welcomed by the currents of the wind, gets swooped up by the birds, and through their voices gets distributed farther. It doesn't recoil at the sound of gunfire from the distant rifle range. It listens in on the conversations of the feasting flies. By this time, I'm nearly at the point, the very tip of land, and the trees are mostly behind and below me. The first day of winter sun is hot against my neck. From here, I can see up and down Carmel Valley, across to the other ridge, and all the way to Point Lobos, where the sand-crashing waves hit down hard again and again. Happiness greets stones and squirrels, jays and juncos, bends down to the near to the ground yellow flowers blooming in December. Though this happiness is something I have, it isn't mine. Knowing it isn't better than any other thing, it thanks the pines for their sweet, pungent scent, holds its face up to the sun, and is blessed. Not a word has been spoken. The happiness comes back along the trail with me, and we head home. Thank you. So have you questions? Answers, perhaps? Yes.
Where is Jack's Peak Park?
So Jack's Peak Park is about 2 miles, 2.5 miles, maybe 3 miles inland, just south of Seaside and north of the city of Monterey. It's very close, if anyone knows where the Monterey Airport is. It's very close to the airport. And it's what you see when you start to drive inland along Highway 68. It's the closest peak there. Yeah. When I had a reading, I guess it was Thursday. No, it was this morning. Oh God. I was in San Jose at the San Jose Poetry Festival this morning, and a woman said, I used to own some of Jack's Peak Park. And I said, well, thank you for giving it to the county because it's mine now. So, other questions? No questions. Yes, Sherry.
Not a question, but I just want to say how lovely it is to hear your reading. And when I came here with my friend Pam and your friend Pam, she said, oh, it's not poetry, and it is poetry.
Thank you very much, thank you. These two women sitting in the front row I have known since I was a young teenager for many, many years. Yeah. Isn't that something? Yeah, it's really, really nice.
And we spent a fair amount of time out in nature.
One day, I just have to tell you, Pam and I used to do things that we would never do nowadays. But one day we had half a gallon of Gallo wine, and we walked out to these canyons near our homes, and we sat on a log and watched a cow give birth.
I remember the smell.
Oh, you remember that smell?
Yeah.
Yeah. We were like 14, 15 years old.
That would be exciting then.
It was quite amazing. And I write about those places also in this book because the places of our childhoods, the natural places of our childhoods, tend to have a strong, they locate in us in a really strong way. If you've ever noticed how kids, for the most part, less so nowadays, but in general, would much prefer to be outdoors than they would to be indoors. They want to go outside because they know that that's the real world, and the indoor world is not the real world. Though we are trying very well, doing a very good job of making them disbelieve that inner truth with the handheld devices. For about 35 years, I've taught poetry to kids. And I used to take them outside and have them lie down on the ground and look up at the clouds, and I would ask them, you've all done it. I see people are nodding, we've all done it, right? And I'd say, what do you see? And they'd look up at the clouds and they'd say, oh yeah, there's that guy in the top hat riding on the back of a dragon. Oh, there's a woman with 22 little children at her feet. Now, I take kids out, and this is a story I tell in the book also, and we lie down and I say, the day is beautiful, the kids are the same, the sky is bright. We lie down and I ask them, look up, what do you see? And they look at each other like there's something the matter with me. And then they say to me, well, we see clouds, Miss Patrice. And that, it's nice to make fun of things that are tragedies, but that is actually a tragedy, and it's very true, that story, that repeatedly that happens where kids have dissociated from the natural world because they don't have enough experience there. So, yes. I know, exactly. I was looking at you this whole time, so happy to see you again, David. It's been a while. I know, it's been a while.
My experience listening to you and reading your writing is this constant spinning off into my own experience. And I can't think of any other writer that generates it with such frequency. It's hard to listen to because I keep losing the reading and following the images because they go out in every direction.
That's
It's really
true.
very precious.
Well, that's really my goal. My goal, you know, nobody can tell the stories that you will tell. Whether you write them down, or you paint them, or you whisper them to a child, or you sing them. No one can tell the stories you will tell. Even the same thing that happens to you with a friend or a husband or a wife, you have two entirely different experiences. You may have retold a story and the person who was there with you will say, that's not how it happened. Well, because they had their own experience, you had yours. And because of that, and because of the fact, I believe, as Muriel Rukeyser said, the world is made of stories. We need to tell our stories to each other. And when we tell the stories, in whatever form we choose, we shorten the divide between us that makes us think we're so different from each other. And we realize just how similar we are. My belief is that if we told each other stories with more frequency, and I don't mean to sound naive, that there would be less harm done in the world. Because it's hard to hurt somebody who you realize is just the same as you are. And so it's both the uniqueness of our stories and the similarity of experience. There are only so many human experiences that makes the telling of each of our stories so deeply, deeply important. And so that's what the goal is in my writing, is to inspire people to find their own voices and to tell their own stories. So any other questions? Yes.
What other books have you written?
My first nonfiction book is called Writing and the Spiritual Life, Finding Your Voice by Looking Within. And that came out a number of years ago. It's currently out of print, and I'm hoping that this book will cause that book to come back into print. I am also the author of 2 collections of poetry, most recently in 2013, The Knot Untied. And I'm an anthologist. It's something you do with your clothes on. I edit anthologies of poetry, and I've done many books with Henry Holt, collections of poetry for teenagers on given topics: Truth and Lies, Revenge and Forgiveness, Faith and Doubt, and those books are easily available. But before I close, I would like to tell you one thing. I have a goal with this book, and if I sound like a book slut or a whore or something terrible, I don't really mind sounding that way because it's true. The next book I want to write, my editor at Beyond Words is interested in purchasing, but I have to first sell 3,000 copies of this title in a year's time. This is a terrible truth that most nonfiction books sell 3,000 copies in their entire lifetimes. My book is a niche book. It's a small market. I'm not writing a thriller. I'm not Michael Crichton, and as you can tell, I'm not Danielle Steele. And so my goal with this book is to sell those copies because I have another book which is called A Passion for Piero, The Value of Art in Ordinary Life, that I would very much like to write. So if you wouldn't mind today, purchasing as many copies as you might like to. But in addition, just to tell someone else, which doesn't cost any money at all, to tell someone else. I have lots of cards here with information about my book and my upcoming events. And also I am really grateful you're here supporting an independent bookstore. My book tour, 10-city book tour, includes only one non-independent bookstore because in that city, in San Luis Obispo, there is no independent bookstore because they have been run out, and I have a deep commitment to supporting independent bookstores. So if you would like to buy as many copies of my book today as you can, I would be most grateful. But more than that, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for having me.